Hello everybody, welcome and thanks for tuning in. All of a sudden I find myself with 5 projects going on at the same time. So I think that's probably a record for me. I'm still working on the Ford 4000. I finally got all the parts for the Case DC project. Looking forward to getting back to that one. Unfortunately, I think I lost a cylinder in my 1914 Model T, so that has now become a future project as well. I also got a replacement set of wheels for my Fordson F tractor, and that will be a video of its own, hopefully here in the near future. But the focus of today's video is going to be on this 1952 Willys Overland pickup. It's a very cool rig. It's 4-wheel drive. One of the unique things about this project is I don't own the truck. This is my cousin's truck. They had it trailered out to me across country, and I'm really excited to work on it. So we'll do a quick walk around on the truck, and then we'll dive right in. So the way I like to go about these projects first is to go through the mechanical systems completely and thoroughly, see what works, see what doesn't, fix what needs to be fixed, basically make the thing roadworthy and safe again. Then we'll start thinking about the aesthetics. And the plan is to keep this mostly original, which I'm a big fan of. I would hate to see this thing hot rodded out. This truck has been painted at least once in the past, and it's pretty evident to me what was probably the original color. I would call that like a dark hunter green or some type of dark green. But it's evident pretty much all over the truck, wherever the white paint is flaking off, under the hood, on the front grille, and in the entire inside of the cab. I know it's a little dark in here, but you can see that the door jambs and the doors are still green, the dash is still green. And you can see the firewall as well. It's all that same dark green color. And if you look under the hood over here, all this in here, all down there, that's all white overspray. So whoever painted this in the past didn't give a whole lot of care to masking things off, at least under the hood. And the orange striping that they put on top, they didn't mask down here very well either. The body panels and fenders all seem to be pretty good, with a couple exceptions here and there. There are a lot of unique lines and low points and high points and, you know, bumps like this. Even the fenders here come to kind of a point right there, and then they're raised right there where that stripe is. The doors have ribs molded into the door panel itself on the top and the bottom. And then it's also got 2 inset panel areas right here, and then a more narrow one right there. We do have some evidence of some Bondo in here. It's pretty thick stuff, so somebody did not do a very good job of prepping before they put the body filler on, because it's rusting through there. I always like to start the projects with an initial investigation and assessment. I'm here in the engine compartment first because it's not starting. I guess it did run just a few days ago when they loaded it onto the trailer to bring it out here, but when they got it here, it's not wanting to start. So that's okay. I was going to go through all the systems anyway. We're going to start here. We're going to check spark. We're going to check the fuel system, you know, the fluids and all that, and see if we can get it to run, see if it's got oil pressure, see if it smokes or not, maybe even check the engine compression. And that will allow me to make a more thorough assessment of what we've got here and what needs to be done. Besides not firing up, there's also another issue. When you press the starter, sometimes you get this horrendous grinding noise. So I'm making the assumption that either some of the teeth on the Bendix are bad or missing, or some of the teeth on the flywheel are bad or missing. More likely it's the starter that's the problem. And before we get started, you can see down in there, that's the maker's tag. All right, we're going to check for spark on the first cylinder now. All right, so keep your eyes right there. All right, good, we've got spark. This is the oil fill, and it's also the dipstick, and it's quite long, as you can see. So it's actually got a little bit too much oil in it, not enough to cause any issues. And the other thing is the oil seems to be a little bit runny. So there might be a little bit of fuel in the oil, perhaps from you know, choking it a lot when you're trying to start it. The oil is just a little bit runny, but it's not terrible. It's definitely good enough to get it running on, and once we get it running well, we can change the oil at that point. Well, I know there's some gas in the system. I added about a gallon to the tank myself. And then you can see this bowl is full, and that fuel pump bowl is full down there as well. The gas looks a little bit yellow to me at first glance, so there's a good chance it's been sitting for a while. The other thing that's a little bit concerning is you can see on the carburetor there, it's all wet from about here down to where it mates to the manifold. So let's see. Yeah, it definitely smells like fuel. So it's also leaking on, I think, both sides of the butterfly shaft, and it's leaking right there. I don't know what's going on there. Let me show you something I found here. If I grab the top of the carburetor and I move it back and forth, first of all, I can see fuel coming out right there. Watch. See that? So let's check the coolant. I see some evidence of moisture, perhaps some condensation, but I don't see any coolant in there. So hopefully maybe it's like 75% full and just needs a few quarts to top it off. I don't know, it could be completely empty. But let's put a few quarts in there and see if it doesn't fill it up. Still isn't filling up. Let's try a little more. All right, we've got the coolant system back up to capacity where it should be. And she was very low. It's about probably almost a gallon low. We know it's got spark. I know it's got fuel because the accelerator pump is working. Well, you heard it try to fire off there a little bit. Got fuel and spark. The engine should be running. So if you can see the spark plugs down there, they're very old and rusty, and there's a lot of debris around the base of the spark plugs. So I'm gonna get some compressed air and blow all that away. And then we're gonna hit all four of those with a bunch of penetrating oil, because at some point we're gonna wanna take those out. All right, that's a little better. All right, let's have a look at spark plug number one. Luckily, it did come out. Holy cow. It was completely fouled with fuel. And there's no way that thing was going to light off. All right, I actually attempted to clean the electrode and the spark plug there, and I've got it in my antique tester. I want you to watch right there. It's supposed to make a spark, right? it wasn't making a spark at all, and there was even smoke coming off of it. So this spark plug is toast. All right, here's number 2. It was just as bad as number 1 was in the engine. Let's see if it makes a spark at all. Nope. And for those of you out there that don't know what a spark plug is supposed to look like when it fires, watch this one. All right, well, I checked all 4 of the plugs and they're all bad. Number 1 and 2 were not sparking at all. And number 3 and 4 were just barely making a spark, and it was very erratic. So I'll run to the store and get some new plugs, but before I put them all back in, we'll do a compression test on all 4 cylinders just to make sure that the engine is healthy before we go any further. The way I like to do these tests is remove all the spark plugs, open the throttle all the way, and make sure the choke is not engaged at all. And as far as the numbers that we're hoping for here, I think it should be somewhere between 90 and 130. So that's the first thing that we're hoping for. The second thing that we're hoping for is that all cylinders are pretty much the same. You want them to be, you know, maybe within 10% of each other roughly. All right, so I'm gonna get in the cab and crank it, and we'll see what we get for number 1. So number 1, we had about 80. Number 2, we had 88. Number 3, we had 85. And number 4, we had about 80 again. And so if our target range was somewhere between, let's say 90 and 130, then these are all a little bit low. However, this is not all bad news, and I'll tell you why. First of all 4 cylinders are pretty darn consistent across the board, well within our 10% range of variance. So that's the first thing that's good. The second thing that's good that may not be apparent is I happen to know that my compression tester reads low. It just does. You know, I bought it off of Amazon maybe a year and a half ago, and I've used it a lot, and it seems like the more I use the compression tester, the more sort of worn out the gauge gets. But that's what you get when you buy a compression tester off of Amazon for 40 bucks. Someday I'll get myself a good quality one, but in the meantime, this is what we got to work with. So long story short, I think we're just fine here with these values. We got a couple things going on here. We've got the carburetor that's leaking quite profusely, actually, around the base and halfway up the body of the carburetor itself. Like I said before, there may or may not be a crack in there because it's kind of wobbling where it should not be wobbling. So that's going to be an issue no matter what we do with the rest of the stuff. But the primary reason it was not starting, I think, is because of the spark plugs. Right, so now I'm going to install 4 new spark plugs, and we're going to go with AC Delco R45s. All right, I also reattached the air intake hose to the top of the carburetor, and there's even a crankcase breather that goes to the same place. I got that attached. So before we try to start it here, let me tell you what I think has been going on. Not only is it leaking fuel, but that probably means sucking air also. So leaking fuel and sucking air is kind of a double whammy. So I would guess it's probably been very difficult to start in the past because of this. And because it's been difficult to start in the past, I'm assuming that people have used a lot of choke and a lot of throttle to attempt to get it started. And sometimes what happens with that is it just dumps way too much fuel into the cylinders, and it ends up going by the rings down into the oil in the crankcase, which, if you remember at the beginning of the video when we checked the oil level was over full and it was a little bit runny. So despite the carburetor problem and despite the starter problem that we haven't even addressed yet, I think the engine is going to fire up pretty quickly now that we've got new spark plugs in it and they're all dry. So the system is not currently flooded with fuel. So without further ado, let's see if this thing will start up. And if it does, I'm going to drive it right out of the shop and drive it around the property a little bit, and we'll get our eyeballs on the exhaust to see if it's smoking or not, and we'll also get our eyeballs on the engine to see if we got any blow by or anything like that. All right, well, I think that was a success. The charging system does seem to be working, including the gauge in the cab, so that's good. I was getting about 6.5 volts at a slow idle, so I'm making the assumption that at a higher RPM we'd be closer to 7 volts on the charger. And we have to add hood latch to the list of things to fix, because even though the lever actuates, sort of, it doesn't lock into the deal up there when you shut it. The coolant system does not appear to be leaking. So I don't know why it was so low on coolant before. I didn't run it for very long this time because we're just getting to know the truck, but we're gonna assume that the coolant system is working at this point. In the cab here, Our amp meter was registering a little bit on the positive, so that confirms my finding with the multimeter on the battery that our charging system is working a little bit. The temp meter didn't have a chance to come up because it didn't run it very long. The oil pressure meter did come up. At an idle, it was about 25%, and at higher RPM, it was about just below half, so maybe 45% of the way up the meter. So that tells me we have oil pressure. The fuel gauge is read empty this whole time. I don't know if that works or not. All right, probably took me about 40 minutes to get the starter removed. It's just kind of hard to get your hands and the wrenches up in there where you need to get them. So again, the reason the starter is out of the vehicle, because sometimes when you engage the starter, it would make a horrendous grinding noise and it would not spin the engine. I already got a glance at the flywheel, so I think I know the direction we're gonna have to go. But I want to show you this Bendix gear first before I show you the flywheel. So this is not a surprise. You can see how bad the teeth are, right? Go all the way around. They are all pretty much the same. So if you use the straight edge as a guide and we look at the teeth again, it really accentuates the wear. So that's no good. At the very minimum, this gear needs to be replaced. The other thing that's a little bit concerning is this feels pretty gummy to me. It doesn't spin as freely as it should. Anyway, let's go take a look at the flywheel now. We'll see what kind of condition it's in. So I'm gonna find a way to get the camera mounted down there so we can see those teeth. And then I will come up front, get underneath the vehicle, and put a 1 3/8 wrench on that crankshaft pulley and give it a couple rotations while I record it. So you can see as we turn this around that a lot of the teeth on the flywheel are in very good condition. However, there are 2 places on the flywheel where the teeth are in bad condition. So whenever the bad teeth on the flywheel were lining up with the starter, that's when we were getting that terrible grinding noise because the teeth were not engaging. They were just grinding against each other and not spinning the engine. So there's nothing we can do to fix those teeth on the flywheel. It will need to be replaced. And that means the engine will have to come out. Probably going to do anyway down the road. I was just hoping we weren't going to have to do it quite so soon. But when the engine is out, we can give it a really good look. We can inspect the rear and main seals and also the clutch and the clutch components, of course. So I guess we'll do all that on the next video. So this is going to be a long-term project. We're just at the tip of the iceberg right now. And if you're following my other projects as well, don't worry, we're going to get back to those real soon. I just wanted to get this initial video of the Willys posted so you guys can see this project and what we're dealing with. It's going to be a lot of work, but this is a really cool old rig, and I think the end result is going to be well worth the effort. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care. I just want to do one more thing before we wrap this video up, and it's been bugging me that the hood latch is not working. So I took the pin off here and adjusted it out a little bit so it's just a little bit longer, maybe 3/16 of an inch longer. And now it goes in and latches properly. And then, of course, you put the side hooks on too, and then it is completely secure. And the latch mechanism actually works down here. I also lubed up these spring latches on both sides so they're much easier to pull now. And I love how this fits in the front.